Hi, my name's Sarah, and this is my sister Katie.
And we just want to remind everybody that
Girls like rock too.
If you've been following along with our podcast so far, you've probably picked up on the fact that I am a big fan of Pearl Jam.
Yeah. Pearl Jam, dare I say it, is your favorite band?
Potentially.
Okay.
Potentially.
Yeah, one of the ultimate bands,
One of the ultimate
on the
bands
Girls
for
Like
me.
Rock 2 podcast,
Yes.
for sure.
If this is your first episode, or if you haven't listened to all of our episodes yet, just a little bit of a recap. I picked Pearl Jam's album Yield as one of my 3 Desert Island albums. I listed Eddie Vedder as one of my sexiest rock stars.
That's right, yes.
And I included Pearl Jam's Jeremy as one of my favorite videos from the 90s.
Oh, right. That's right. Yeah. So Pearl Jam has had a bit of a presence on the podcast.
Pearl
so
Jam has
far.
had a bit of a presence on the podcast so far. However, we've yet to devote an entire episode to Pearl Jam.
That's true. It's time.
It is time. Sarah and I figured we're doing this podcast on music. Pearl Jam is one of my favorite bands. It's only appropriate that we do an entire episode on Pearl Jam.
Definitely.
So get ready, listeners. Here it is.
I'm excited.
I'm excited as well. So when we decided to do an episode on Pearl Jam, it's such a broad topic. I'm like, obviously I have to narrow it down and pick one element of Pearl Jam. So I did a little bit of research on their albums, listened to some of their songs that are my favorites. And I started to really think about Pearl Jam's history because they've been around for a long time. And I realized there is a deep contrast between 90s Pearl Jam and 2000s Pearl Jam.
Okay. Yeah, I guess I could see that.
Yeah. Not in terms of members, actually. Pearl Jam's one of the few bands, the 4 core members, Eddie Vedder, Jeff Ament, Stone Gossard, Mike McCready, they've all been in it since the beginning.
Wow.
Yeah. The only member who have come and gone, and kind of a joke with Pearl Jam too, is their drummers.
Yes, I did read about that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Although even that being said, they've had Dave Cameron, who was formerly from Soundgarden. He's been their drummer since Yield era. So he's been a drummer since like 1999 at least.
Yeah, that's quite a long time.
Yeah.
Okay. Wow, that's impressive.
That is impressive. Yeah.
Same 5 guys.
Yeah.
Wow.
But even that's a contrast between 90s Pearl Jam and 2000s Pearl Jam. 90s Pearl Jam, they went through at least 4 drummers. And in the 2000s, it's always been Dave Cameron. So maybe that says a lot about the band.
Yeah.
So to begin talking about 90s Pearl Jam, of course, where do we begin, Sarah?
This I know.
This Sarah knows.
The debut album of Pearl Jam is 10.
Yes. 10. Released August 27th, 1991.
Wow.
Just about a month before another big grunge album was released, which would be
I'm going to go with Nevermind.
Nirvana Nevermind. Before we dive deep into 10, their debut album, let's just backtrack a little bit before. So Stone Gossard, the lead guitarist from Pearl Jam and also a principal songwriter, and Jeff Ament, the bassist, before they were in Pearl Jam, they were actually in another grunge band called Mother Love Bone.
Okay, that is something I did know.
Yes. Yeah. So they were Mother Love Bone in Seattle, grunge band. They actually started to make a little bit of mark on the scene of grunge.
Okay.
Unfortunately, a week before the debut album of Mother Love Bone was set to be released, Andrew Wood, their lead singer, died of a heroin overdose.
Oh, wow. That's sad.
Yeah.
Oh, my gosh.
So as much as I love grunge and I love the 90s, dark side of grunge was, of course, the heroin use.
Yeah, Britpop too by the end,
Yeah.
actually. The drug use. Yeah.
Yeah, so unfortunately, the band disbanded. They didn't decide to stay together as Mother Love Bone. They broke up. And actually, just to throw it all in, all this grunge trivia, Temple of the Dog,
Okay.
Hunger Strikes, Eddie Vedder's in that with Chris Cornell.
Oh, I did not know that.
Chris Cornell formed that as a tribute to Andrew Wood.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
nice.
Yeah. But back to 10. Back to Pearl Jam. So at first, after Andrew Wood died, Jeff Ament and Stone Gossard, understandably so, were really distraught. They weren't playing music for a bit. But then eventually they did start to play music again with Mike McCready, the guitarist for Pearl Jam.
Nice.
And Jeff, Mike, Stone, still in Pearl Jam to this day.
Wow. That's
Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah, like almost like what, 35,
Wow.
whatever years later, 4 years later.
Yeah.
So yeah, they started jamming together. They had a lot of music from Mother Love Bone, so they weren't hard up for songs, but they needed a singer. So they found out about this guy named Eddie Vedder living in San Diego, sent Eddie their demo tape, very 90s, the tape.
Nice.
Eddie listened to it. They were so interested in Eddie that they flew him from San Diego to Seattle to audition.
Wow.
And he came and auditioned. The rest is history. To this day,
Yeah.
Eddie, Mike, Stone, and Jeff all still in the band.
Wow.
Yeah.
I bet you Eddie did a pretty good audition.
I would imagine. Eddie's got the voice. He's got an interesting personality for sure. So a lot of the songs on 10 were the music, not the lyrics, but the music was written for Mother Love Bone, and then Eddie Vedder wrote all the lyrics.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so a lot of them had different names at the beginning, and then Eddie put his lyrics in, so
Okay.
put his own spin on things. And Sarah and I were talking about 10 because who doesn't know 10? And it's funny because Sarah brought up, she's like, it's kind of like Definitely Maybe. It's such a solid debut album. And it's funny because I had wrote that in my notes. I put 10 along the lines of Oasis Definitely Maybe and The Killer's Hot Fuzz. Just solid debut albums. Well written. As Sarah always mentions about albums, it flows together. You got harder songs, softer songs, songs about heartbreak, in usual Pearl Jam fashion. A lot of dark issues they touch on.
Yeah.
Even Flow, I used to be like, that's like a fun whatever song. Well, it's about homelessness.
Oh,
And
I
then,
didn't know that.
Yeah, and then Why Go? That's about a young girl being taken to a mental institution against her will.
Wow.
Black, one of my favorite Pearl Jam songs, by the way.
Oh.
About heartbreak, you can really feel it. And then Jeremy, I've already touched on in past episodes about gun violence. And then there's Alive. And Alive is a semi-autobiographical song about Eddie Vedder because it's about a young man who finds out who he thought was his father was not. His actual father was dead.
Oh, wow.
Which is what happened with Eddie. He found out when he was young that his stepdad was actually not his biological father, and his biological father was already dead.
Whoa, that's intense to find out.
Yeah. So
Gosh.
it's definitely an album that touches on some pretty dark issues. Personally, I recommend listening to the album from beginning to end. Well-written music. Eddie's lyrics are just so beautiful to listen to. Release, the album ends with Release, and that's just such a meditative, reflective song. And I believe that it's also about, in regards to Eddie Vedder finding out the news of his father and just releasing, his emotions. And
Oh, wow.
one of my favorite lines of Pearl Jam is "I'll ride the wave where it takes me,"
Yeah.
as Sarah knows.
Yeah.
And that's kind of become my theme in life, like just ride the wave where it takes you, wherever life takes you. And so I just think the album ends on a really nice meditative note. And 10 was certified 13 times platinum.
Gosh.
And it was probably arguably one of the biggest grunge albums, if not the grunge album. It put grunge on the map, and it made Pearl Jam a household name, really.
It did. It
Yes.
did. It brought them global fame for sure.
Really, it brought them global
Yeah.
fame. They did come out with some music videos. As I had mentioned in an earlier episode, they came out with a music video for Jeremy. It won the the MTV Video of the Year award. So people were liking Pearl Jam. They were.
Yeah. It's a great album.
It
And
is.
It came out in 91. It really kind of set the stage for American rock.
It did.
Of the 90s.
It
like
did.
truly trailblazing.
Yes.
Yeah, that
Trailblazing album.
Yeah, that's like the one Pearl Jam album I actually know all the songs to.
Yeah. I think a lot of people, if you put it on, like, I think everybody knows Even Flow, Alive,
It's
Jeremy,
so good.
even the beginning to Jeremy, that guitar. I think
Yeah.
everybody's like, oh, wow, this is Pearl Jam.
Yeah.
Yeah, Pearl
Yeah.
Jam at its finest. So all of this being said about 10, what do you do? What do you do when your debut album is 10?
I don't
what
know
do you
what
do
you
after
do.
that? You know?
Yeah. Yeah.
So obviously your record label is going to have a lot of faith in you and they're going to put money into you. So they did come out with a second album. So they came out with Verses in, I believe it was released October 1993. So just 2 years after 10 was released. As I said, the record label put a lot of money into this. Verses was their first album recorded with Brendan O'Brien.
Okay.
Pretty renowned music
Yeah,
producer.
yep.
Yep. So that's when they began working with Brendan O'Brien. I believe 4 of their albums were produced with him
Oh wow.
in the 90s. And they got to record at a really nice studio in California. And it's funny. So it's funny when I think about Pearl Jam. I always thought, I guess because I started liking them in the 2000s,
Yeah.
I always thought like they got along together. They got this brotherhood. They're best friends. Like they must have had such a great time jamming. But when I looked into their 90s, the background on recording their albums, it wasn't like that at all. There was a lot of tension in the band.
Yeah.
A
Yeah.
lot of tension and a lot of struggles. Like Eddie Vedder, he really, really struggled with being famous.
Yes. Yes.
So when it came to recording verses, he was uncomfortable. He thought, how am I supposed to make these hard, intense, dramatic songs when I'm in this beautiful studio getting paid like all this money to do it? So apparently he actually tried to make himself uncomfortable by purposely sleeping in his truck in San Francisco for a bit.
Wow,
I think
okay.
to feel hardship to like write this music. And another big difference between 10 and Versus is 10, as I mentioned, Stone wrote the music, Eddie wrote the lyrics after. Versus was a jam session. So a lot of the songs were recorded as them jamming together. And I don't know if you've listened to a lot of Versus. I believe you listened to a bit of it.
I did. Yeah.
Yeah.
I did. Yeah. Yeah.
I feel like you could feel that. You can feel that Versus is more of a jam session and them coming together. It's slightly more, I would say, experimental than 10. It's not as straightforward rock as 10.
It's funny you mentioned that because feels a bit more raw. I don't know
It
if
is.
that's
It's
the
definitely
right,
more raw.
but yeah.
There's a few fairly big hits from Versus. I think a lot of people know Daughter.
I think that's
Yeah.
one of my favorite Pearl Jam
Yeah.
songs. So
And
good.
it's so funny. It's so like typical Pearl Jam. Again, when I was younger and I listened to it, I was like, "Oh, this is a cool, pretty nice song." And then you get older and you're like, "This song's about a young girl in a abusive household. This isn't pretty at all." But
Yeah.
Pearl Jam just has a way. I was thinking about this morning. They just have a way of taking uncomfortable issues like violence and homelessness and making these comforting songs, which I
Yeah.
think says a lot about Eddie Vedder as a lyricist and about them as a band. It also touches on race issues. WMA, that's about, again, it's about a true story of Eddie Vedder being with a African American friend and the friend getting like pulled over by the police. And of course, Eddie gets away scot-free because he's a white male.
Of course.
Touches about that. Again, like Jeremy on 10, it touches about gun violence. Glorified G, that's about gun violence in America. And then there's also elderly woman behind a counter in a small town. Apparently they had comments made that all of their song titles were just one word. So to kind of go against that, they're like, let's make a really long song title. People usually just call it elderly woman. And again, I thought it was like this nice, like flowy sing-along song. And it's kind of depressing. Like it's about an elderly woman stuck in a small town working behind the counter of a convenience store. And one of her ex-flames who moved out of the small town and did really well for himself comes back. And she's kind of like embarrassed and it's like, I don't even know if I want to say hello because look where I am and look where you are. So Pearl Jam, I just think Eddie, especially got to consider with these albums, he was in his early 20s. I just think he's a very talented lyricist and he really is not afraid to bring up some hard issues.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, definitely. He's a great musician, Eddie
Yeah,
Vedder.
he is a great musician.
Yeah.
And as much I like Versus a lot. I probably don't enjoy it maybe as much as 10, but I do really enjoy it. But apparently for Eddie Vedder, this was his least favorite experience of recording an album was Versus.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
It's a great album.
It is a great album. So I think it's a shame that he thought that. Now, I think
Yeah.
this was also at a time when I would imagine the band was a bit burnt out. They recorded it after an intense tour for 10. So I think they were probably just feeling tired, burnt out.
Yeah.
I would imagine there's always the fear of, writer's block.
Yeah,
you know?
for sure. For
Yeah.
sure. That feeling of overwhelm
Yes.
maybe with
Oh,
the
yeah.
success of 10.
Yes. And what's interesting about Versus 2, which I think says a lot about how much people like Pearl Jam, is they really scaled back on publicity for it and promotion for it. They didn't come out with any music videos for
It's
it.
crazy.
I know.
In the early 90s, like
Yeah.
the music video was
Yeah, and
the
they just
thing.
were like, nope, we don't like all the viewership we got from Jeremy. Like, we're just not going to do
Wow.
music videos. That's not what we're about. And for it not having music videos, not having a lot of publicity, it's still, I think it was certified 7 times multi-platinum.
It did well,
Yeah.
commercially.
Not
yeah.
not as commercially well as 10, but still, that's pretty good. 7 times multi-platinum.
Definitely.
So people did enjoy it. And even to this day, I hear Daughter a lot on the radio. That's become a real
Yeah.
fan favorite.
Yeah.
And then the following year, so they only waited 1 year, they came out with another album called Vitalogy. Vitalogy is different. I'm not gonna say I don't like Vitalogy. I do, and there's quite a few songs that have become my go-to Pearl Jam songs, but I also wouldn't say it's my most favorite album.
Okay.
Vitalogy is very raw.
Yeah, definitely a raw development from Versus.
It's a very raw development from Versus,
Yeah.
and it's some people describe it as punk, some critics describe it as punk. I wouldn't describe it as punk.
No.
I would just describe it as Pearl Jam with a lot more edge.
Okay, that's a good description.
Yeah. So Vitalogy, we also have to think about a few things. We have to think about, first of all, this came out the year that Kurt Cobain killed himself.
Oh, wow. Yeah. That's right.
There's rumors Pearl Jam and Nirvana had a bit of a riff. I don't know if that was true, if that was just, people trying to make a story. But even if they weren't friends with Nirvana, I'm sure that had an effect.
Oh, definitely.
This huge guy from the grunge scene killing himself.
Yeah.
And we have to think about, at the same time as Eddie hears the story, he's struggling with fame himself.
Yeah.
So a lot of the songs on Vitalogy deal with that, like Not For You. That's about the corruptness of the music industry. Just a lot of, again, just Corduroy, that song. I really like that song.
Yeah,
I think that's a lot about struggling with who you are.
Yep.
So I think, from listening to Vitalogy, you can kind of feel and hear the struggles of Eddie Vedder. Again, unfortunately, when they recorded this album, tensions were high.
Yeah.
I think the drummer at the time said that a lot of the tensions rose even higher when Stone Gossard was kind of the mediator before, and then I think he stepped back. I think he was having a hard time because Eddie Vedder was taking on so much creative control.
Okay.
So that made tensions high. And again, I don't think it was a very enjoyable experience for the band. Right. During this time, it was also when Mike McCready, their guitarist, he was really struggling with alcohol and drug abuse issues. So he did enter rehab.
Oh, that's too bad.
They switched drummers at this point. They fired Dave, and I'm not even going to attempt his last name because I'm going to butcher it. It's like Abruzzi's or something. Sorry, Dave. They fired him because of, they said, difference in political views.
Oh, okay.
So again, you also have to consider during this time, tensions were high. This is when Pearl Jam was really fighting against Ticketmaster.
Okay, is this the album of that? Yeah.
So they were going through, I'm sure, a lot of stress and work with that. They were fighting against Ticketmaster because of the incredibly high ticket prices, which unfortunately, 30 years later, we are still dealing with.
Yeah. Kudos to Pearl Jam for that. Gosh.
They even took them to court and everything. So, Vitalogy, I think, was a weird time for the band. And to be perfectly honest, I feel like you can feel that in the album.
Okay, the one song I was listening to Vitalogy for today's episode, and I'm not a huge Pearl Jam listener, although I am growing to really appreciate their music.
You kind of have to if you hang out with me.
Yeah, exactly. And Bugs.
Yeah, you like it? That
It just
what a random song out of Vitalogy to pick out.
Well, it just stuck out for me. He's just like Bugs, or like talking about bugs. I'm like, wow.
Yeah, it's a very interesting album.
It is. That stuck out for me because it was just so interesting.
Yeah, and as I said, this is the first album. Stone Gossard said this is the first album that Eddie took total creative control.
Okay.
And it's again, we talked about Eddie struggling. It's like he didn't want to be famous anymore. So he's like, I'm going to come out with music that people aren't all going to listen to.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Now, that being said, though, with all of this, Better Man's on the album. Arguably one of Pearl Jam's most famous songs.
I would think so.
And such a good song. And again, like Daughter, it's talking about a really hard issue, a woman in an abusive relationship, but yet you feel so good listening to it. And they don't say it through the lyrics in the song, but by the end of the song, you could feel like this woman's going to get through it and she's going to get better.
That's a really good analogy of the song. Yeah, that's such a beautiful song.
It's a beautiful song. That's one of my favorite Pearl Jam songs. And then there's also Nothing Man, which it's before Better Man in terms of chronology on the songs of the album, but Nothing Man, I've read that's the sequel to Better Man, because Better Man is the woman's perspective of being in an abusive relationship. Nothing Man is the man's perspective when she leaves. He's essentially nothing because she was everything.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. Wow.
Also, random fact. I don't know. Did you watch Californication, Dave Duchovny's show?
I did, but
They
I
played
don't.
Nothing Man on it in one
Oh.
snippet, and I was like, oh man, that is such a good
Yeah.
a good song to play for a show about a guy who just loses it all because he just
Yeah.
throws this woman away.
Yeah. No,
So,
definitely.
Nothing Man 2, on a personal note, when I went to see them live in 2022, that was the second song they played.
Oh, wow.
And I remember like getting goosebumps because it just brought me back to my youth and listening to Pearl Jam and at home in Beachville and all my used albums that I bought from the local record shop of Pearl Jam. So as you can probably tell from this episode and past episodes, I have a very emotional connection with Pearl Jam. Yeah. So my final note on Vitalogy would be Spin the Black Circle. Did you listen to that one?
Probably. I did listen to the whole album,
Yeah.
but I'd need to listen to it a bit more.
So that one won them a Grammy for best rock song. And
Wow.
if you want to get a sense of Pearl Jam 90s and Eddie Vedder in the 90s, watch their acceptance speech.
That's probably what I watched then.
Did you watch it?
It must be that. He looks so awkward.
And he's just so, and
Yeah.
like, okay, I hate to say it, Eddie, I love you, but you're kind of a douche. Like, he's just like, he's like, I feel nothing from winning this. Like, I really feel nothing. He's like, I guess maybe my dad would have liked it. And then he walks off stage. And like, I watched this as an adult. I didn't watch it when it actually came out in 95 or 96.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking like, dude, why did you even go? If you're gonna be that
Yeah.
unthankful and ungrateful, why did you bother going? But who knows? Maybe the band wanted to go. Maybe their manager was like, "Oh, you got to go." The record label at that time had so much say. Maybe they were like, "You have to go. You're gonna be nominated
that's
for a
true.
Grammy."
Maybe he was so shocked that they actually won. I don't know.
Maybe, but yeah. If you want to get a taste of 90s Eddie Vedder, watch that clip. You're just like, ooh. I believe it's even like Chris Isaac and Lisa Kudrow. It's so 90s. Lisa Kudrow, Chris Isaac give them the award. And yeah, just such an ungrateful rock star at that point.
But then the other man comes and he's like, "Oh, we want to thank." So
Well, yeah, I
kinda
think the
makes
others
up
were
for
like,
it.
because I don't think they were expecting Eddie.
to say
So
that.
this is what I find so interesting about 90s Pearl Jam. As I said, I thought they were brotherhood, always together, best buds, but reading, and you could probably even pick up on from this episode, there was a huge contrast between Eddie Vedder and the rest of the band.
Yeah.
And I would imagine, don't quote me on this one because I didn't read it anywhere, and maybe it is somewhere, comment, correct me if I'm wrong, but Stone and Jeff were probably like, come on, guy, this was our band. And Mike too. This was our band. We started it. We wrote all this music, and then you come in and you take creative control, and you're kind of crabby about being famous.
Well, and it's often with rock bands, it's the lead singer that is in the front of the photos, right? So
Yeah.
I guess
And don't get me wrong, I love Eddie Vedder.
Yeah.
I think you're incredibly talented. And I can only imagine being in your early 20s. You come from nothing to within a year coming out with this album and being on the cover of magazines. Everybody knows your name.
can't
You can't go to
imagine.
the grocery store because everyone was like,
Yeah.
I do. I would imagine. I feel for you, Eddie. I'm sure that was a very, very hard transition. And you can just really feel it throughout the 90s discography of Pearl Jam.
yeah.
Then we're gonna go. So they came out Vitalogy in '94. It did pretty well. It was multi-platinum. I don't remember how many times, but it was multi-platinum. People were still listening to them. Then in '96 they came out with No Code.
No Code.
No Code. Did you listen to No Code at all while researching?
I did. I listened to a bit of it.
Probably didn't recognize any of the songs.
I didn't recognize any of the
No.
songs. Hail Hail, that stuck out for me.
Yeah.
I thought it was pretty
Yeah.
good, but
I believe that may have been a single.
Oh, okay. But no, I didn't know any of the songs. Yeah.
So again, Eddie Vedder took total creative control with this album, and I love No Code.
Oh, yeah.
It's different, and I find No Code as I find No Code not as depressing as their last two albums before it. So I was researching on No Code. Surprise, surprise, the beginning of the recording, they weren't getting along. Tensions were really high. Jeff Ament, I don't know why, but they didn't tell him until 2 days after recording. Oh, by the way, we're recording. So he wasn't even included. So he was on the brink of leaving, which I don't really blame him. And Mike McCready had made a comment that he was like, I forget the exact words he uses. I'm not quoting him, but basically saying, Eddie intimidated me. I feel like I couldn't talk to him and make suggestions because Eddie was just really intimidating, which I can only imagine. Like I said, that clip from the Grammys, imagine dealing with that.
No, I can't.
So again, the band Tensions were high. Eddie Vedder just didn't want to be famous. So apparently, Who You Are, they came out with as the first single.
Okay.
And it's not really a radio airplay type Pearl Jam song. And they did that on purpose because Eddie just didn't want to be famous. It's like he didn't want people listening to their album. Although, joke's on you, Eddie, because it still was certified platinum.
I was going to say it's funny because
So people
Pearl
were still
Jam,
listening to you as much as you didn't want them to.
all their
Your slew of
albums do
fans
well.
still were.
Yeah.
So I was researching on No Code. I always knew it was different. I always knew that it didn't do as well commercially. To be honest, I've listened to alternative rock stations like from our area, FM 96, Edge 102, so often, so many years. I've never once heard them play a song from No Code on the radio. And I probably hear Daughter like once a day.
Yeah.
So
that's a big one.
that, to me, that says a lot. But as I read about No Code, it's actually kind of a nice story, and it kind of shows the beginning of Pearl Jam transitioning from this divide to more of a brotherhood.
Okay.
So apparently the drummer of the time, Jack Irons, he had drummed for the Chili Peppers years before.
Oh.
Then he joined Pearl Jam. And apparently he's given a lot of credit for getting the band back together. He was very big on telling them to hash it out, talk about it. Apparently he was very big on spirituality and
cool.
Doing that. And then I read that Eddie said that No Code is about self-exploration and about figuring out who you are, which is funny because one of the songs is called Who You Are.
Oh, that's so cool. What a cool theme for an album.
Yeah, and when you listen to it, it's a very meditative album. It touches on darker issues, like Hail Hail is about a couple who's not getting along, but not as dark, as I said, as Versus or Vitalogy. It's meditative. Who You Are, that's one of my favorite Pearl Jam songs. It's very just finding out who you are and enjoying the process. And Eddie said that No Code was very self-reflective, and it made him figure out what type of person he could be. And I bought this album when I was 14. So I think I bought it at a really good time because you're 14, you're starting high school, you're a teenager, you're very self-reflective at that time, and you're totally figuring out who you are at that time.
Totally.
So I think this album just came to me at a really good time. Smile, that's one of my favorite Pearl Jam songs ever with the harmonica. And just, again, it's not a depressing song. It's nice to listen to. And then Around the Bend, that's a very good song to listen to if you want to go to bed. It's very slow. And apparently it was written, Jack Irons, it was written, I guess he had a new baby at the time, a lullaby for the baby, which you can totally tell. So I don't think I would recommend you starting with No Code if you don't know Pearl Jam and you want to get into Pearl Jam. I wouldn't start with No Code, but after listening to a few of their albums, give it a listen to, because I think you'll find it meditative and, as Eddie said, self-reflective, and it's just a nice album, I think.
Yeah.
As I said, it was still certified platinum, so it still did sell records. And at the end of recording, Eddie told the band that I'm burnt out. I'm taking on too much pressure with writing. You guys have to start helping me with writing music.
Oh, okay.
And this is kind of where we transition into 1998's Yield, my favorite Pearl Jam album.
Ah, nice.
Yes. So Jeff Ament had said, we go from 1996 to him almost leaving the band with No Code to him saying that Yield was, I believe he said something along the lines of, it was actually an enjoyable experience recording Yield.
Nice.
And the band really became a band and a brotherhood at this point.
Yeah.
A lot of the other members contributed to the music.
Oh, cool.
Jeff Ament, he even wrote Low Light and Pilot. Those were all his lyrics.
Oh, cool.
I believe Stone wrote lyrics to maybe No Way. One of them he wrote. So they really became, as I said, a band, a collaborative band where everybody's becoming involved. And Mike McCready commented that he was intimidated by Eddie, and he actually started to feel like he could talk to Eddie and they could actually make music together, which I would imagine is really a much nicer feeling being in a band rather than being scared by the singer.
For sure. Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
And I just love Yield. Kind of what I was saying about No Code. It's a bit more positive. It's not as depressing. They still touch on some deeper issues, like Brain of JFK talks about the world being affected by the assassination of JFK. The second song on the album, Faithful, that kind of touches on. I mentioned it briefly when I talked about Jeremy in our past episode on religion and the band's kind of distaste for organized religion.
Okay.
So it talks about some deeper issues, but there's just a lot of positive notes from this album that I really appreciate. As I mentioned, Jeff wrote Pilot and he wrote Low Light. And those are just really... Pilot apparently was based on a dream he had of him growing old, sitting on a front porch with his dog.
Oh, wow.
And then he said Low Light was a response to that dream. And Low Light's such a pretty song. I'm going to quote it because I don't want to butcher what Jeff said, because he really summed up the song in a really nice way. And I feel like it kind of sums up Pearl Jam in general and this era. So what Jeff said about Low Light was, it's about a kind of gratefulness at finding that place of calm and peace at my center and getting a glimpse of the person I could choose to be.
Wow.
Isn't that nice?
That's beautiful. I love it.
It is. And I just listen to Low Light. That's one of I have my like going to work songs, and I have my coming home and relaxing songs, especially if I'm working night shift. And Low Light's one of those songs. And I just thought that was such a nice quote. And he's referring to Low Light, but I think it can kind of refer to Yield as a whole. Just the band coming together and and then Do the Evolution.
That song I know.
That one everyone knows. So again, this shows the change in Pearl Jam from early 90s to now we're slowly getting closer to the 2000s. They actually came out with a music video for Do the Evolution. That was their first music video since the era of 10. Wow. They're not in the video. They don't show their faces. It's all animated, but still they did a video. And I'm old enough to remember when that video came out. It was played a lot on Much Music. I would imagine MTV too.
It was, yeah. Pretty intense. I watched it the other day.
It is. It is.
It's been a while since I've watched it.
Typical like, Pearl Jam fashion, talking about the evolution of humankind and how we've all gone to pot.
Yeah, basically.
But it makes you think.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So I recommend watching it.
Yeah.
And yeah, Yield is definitely just my favorite album. Oh, and of course, I have to mention, and I mentioned already on our Desert Island album episode, Given to Fly. Oh, such a good song.
Is that your favorite Pearl Jam song, you think?
One of them, potentially.
It's lovely.
It is. Yeah. It's all about redemption. And I have this like weird obsession with the theory of redemption. That's why I really like Johnny Cash, because he talks a lot about that with his music. Just redeeming yourself and getting through a hard time. And Given to Fly is about this guy who's going through all these hard times, but he still gives his love away, which just says a lot, right?
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
A lovely message.
It is a lovely message.
Yeah.
So I definitely recommend Yield. I would even say, you know, if you're like, maybe I'm going to get into Pearl Jam now. Katie's kind of making me intrigued. Start with 10 and maybe save Yield for like the third album you listen to.
What would be your second one, would you suggest?
That I'll have to get back to you on.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Maybe like, you know what? No, here's what I'll say. Start with Yield and then listen to Dark Matter, their latest one. So kind of start with the old and then the new, and then I'll have to in a later episode come out with it. But Yield, I would say listen like third or fourth album of theirs. So that's kind of my musical journey of Pearl Jam. And my homework to you guys listening out there is watch Pearl Jam perform Black in 1992 at the Pink Pop Music Festival, and then watch them perform Black in 2010 at Hyde Park.
Oh my God, I think I actually watched that.
Yeah.
A couple of clips of them in Hyde Park. Yeah.
It's like it's two different bands playing the same song. At Pink Pop, it's very well done and Eddie's very emotional, but it's just this band there's no synergy. Like you have Dave smoking while he's playing the drums. Stone's kind of doing this weird jumping up and down thing to like this song that's slow and emotional.
Yeah.
You're kind of like, what are you doing there? And then you watch them at Hyde Park and they're still playing the song. They're still emotional, but they're playing it together. And of course there's a difference between 92 and 2010. Obviously the band looks older, but not just the way they look age-wise. You'll just tell the band is just it's got a synergy.
Yeah.
They worked together in 2010. And I think by watching those two videos, you'll just get an idea of like, okay, this is what Katie means by 90s Pearl Jam and 2000s Pearl Jam.
That's a really cool exercise, Katie, that you're
my little Girls Like Rock 2 homework for you guys.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yes. I also do recommend too, again, if you're like, oh, maybe I want to get back into Pearl Jam, or I want to start getting into Pearl Jam, watch Cameron Crowe's documentary on them, 20,
Okay.
made in 2011. So it's kind of dated at this point, but that talks about their first 20 years together. And they touch base, the band themselves touch base a lot on what I've talked about in this episode of them kind of having a hard time in the 90s and then getting along better closer to the 2000s.
That's really cool. It's because that's their final album of the 90s, Yield.
Yes, Binaural actually came out in 2000.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, Yield is their last album.
Yeah, like wrapping up the decade, but like
Yeah.
you said, kind of
Yeah.
creating a more cohesive feel as a band.
Yes.
eh?
And Yield actually was, it's still, I believe it was certified platinum, but it was their first album since 10 to not reach number one on the Billboard 100.
Oh, wow.
So I think that also says a lot about the times. We're looking at 1998. People are tired of grunge. Pop music's getting really big. You know, the Spice Girls are at their height.
Yeah.
Rap music, as I've said, in the late 90s, that started getting really big.
Yeah.
And so I think the fact that it didn't reach number one just says a lot about the era as well.
So all the other ones reached number one.
I guess, yeah, that's what I read.
Wow. Okay.
I would take that as what that means.
No, you make a good point. That
Yeah.
kind of symbolizes a transition in the genres of music that are big at that time and
Yeah.
that become bigger in the early 2000s.
So thank you very much for joining me on my 90s Pearl Jam journey. Look in episodes to come. I will eventually come out with an episode on 2000s Pearl Jam where we can go through the 2000s discography together. Quite a bit different from their 90s. Not saying it's better or worse, just different. I think to me, any Pearl Jam is good Pearl Jam.
Yeah.
So yeah, look for that episode. So for anyone who either is like, oh man, I forgot about Pearl Jam, I want to listen to them again from listening to this, or if you're like, I don't know a lot about Pearl Jam, now I do, I want to listen to them. I've created a playlist on my favorite Pearl Jam songs, and I'm totally copying Sarah, what she did with Blur, just in order of a good flow, in my opinion. And if you guys think there's songs I should add that are better, then drop in the comments section. I'd like to know. I'd like to know
Awesome.
everyone's opinions on Pearl Jam.
Yeah, it's linked down in the description below if you're listening on YouTube.
Yeah. So thank you for listening.
Thank you, Katie, for sharing your journey. I really enjoyed it. I don't know a ton about Pearl Jam, so it was
Now you probably know too much. but-
well, it's always so great listening to a music fan who's a big fan of the band talking about their band.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So if you're probably a fan of Pearl Jam, if you're watching this,
You'll feel it. You'll feel
yeah,
my vibe.
you feel that. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's nice.
Yeah.
So we just want to thank you for tuning in. Thank you for your time. We really appreciate it. Katie and I post a new episode every other Friday. We are available on YouTube and Spotify.
And we just want to remind everybody that
Girls like rock too.
And don't forget to hit subscribe.